People can see through the identity-based slop and the partisan propaganda posing as news, and they're tired of watching it. The audience has left the station. But we began the show by talking about how some of the worst and most destructive relics of the civil rights era are now finally being eliminated. So to end the show on yet another happy note for the Daily Cancellation, we have some similar news. Some of the worst and most destructive relics of the BLM era are now also meeting that fate. And here's the wrap with the report, quote, NBC News eliminated its teams dedicated to covering issues affecting Black, Asian American, Latino, and LGBTQ plus groups as part of its layoffs of about 150 staffers on Wednesday, according to two sources familiar with the matter, a significant culling as the Peacock network separates from its sister network, MSNBC. The cuts mean that the verticals NBC BLK, NBC Asian America, NBC Latino and NBC Out will no longer have dedicated teams bolstering their coverage. The total reductions, which affected NBC News' entire news operation, make up about 7% of NBC News' newsroom of about 2,000 staffers. Yes, although you may not have realized that NBC had entire news divisions with names like NBC BLK, as in NBC for Black people and Black stories. They also had a whole division for gay people called NBC Out, in addition to NBC Latino, NBC Asian. They had segregated news divisions for different identities, essentially. Strangely enough, there was no NBC Indian or NBC Midget, or there wasn't even an NBC Furry, which I thought was interesting. So they didn't cover every single demographic group in the country with all these different news divisions. But to be fair, they made a good faith effort. And now that effort is being dismantled, piece by piece. But as we all know, great ideas, like great minds, are often only appreciated when they're gone. And therefore, to be sure that I wasn't missing anything here, I thought it'd be a good idea to take a look back at the extraordinary journalism produced by some of these highly specialized NBC News divisions. In particular, I took a close look at the work product of NBC BLK and NBC Out over the years, just to get a sense of what we'll be missing going forward. And to set the stage, and bear with me here, I'm going to show you this dash cam footage from a traffic stop in Camden County, Georgia, from back in October of 2023. And I promise it's highly relevant. Watch.
Either put your hands behind your back or you're getting tased. I'm telling you that right now.
Why am I getting tased?
Because you are under arrest for speeding and reckless driving.
I'm not driving. Nobody was hurt. How was I speeding?
You passed me doing 100 miles an hour.
Okay, so that's a speeding ticket, right?
Sir, tickets in the state of Georgia are criminal offenses.
I don't have a ticket in Georgia.
You do now?
Why?
You passed me doing 100 miles an hour.
And what? Am I going
Hands
to jail?
behind your back. Yes, you are going to jail. Hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Yep. Yep.
That was footage from the detention of a Black man named Leonard Cure 2 years ago to the day. It happened on October 16th, 2023. As you saw, he was pulled over for reckless driving. And then rather than comply with the officer, Leonard attempts to strangle him to death on the side of the road. So it's not the ideal response. The officer then struggles with Cure as Cure taunts him and tries to kill him. And then finally, to save his life, the officer fires one shot, killing Leonard Cure. Now, that's the background. Now, if you had to guess, how did NBC Black or NBC BLK or whatever you want to call it cover this particular story? What angle did they take? Well, here's the headline. Quote, my soul aches. Mother speaks out after exonerated son is killed by Georgia police. The Georgia officer who fatally shot Leonard Cure has been placed on administrative leave. So they don't mention the fact that Leonard Cure tried to murder the officer or that the officer fired in self-defense. Instead, the headline states that Cure had been exonerated and that his mother was devastated by his death. Now, they don't tell you how he was exonerated or what that means exactly, but the clear thrust of the headline is that this is a very sad story and the cops may have made a grave mistake. Now, let's read on. Quote, Leonard Cure died Monday morning during an altercation with a Camden County Sheriff's deputy on Interstate 95 near the Georgia-Florida border. The death came 3 years after he served 16 years in prison for an armed robbery conviction he was exonerated of. The 53-year-old had been visiting his mother in Port St. Lucie Friday and was returning home in Metro Atlanta. Mary Cure recalled the last conversation she had with her son early Monday morning before they parted ways. He said, "I love you and I'll see you soon." That's the last I heard from him. She said, "I was uneasy every time he left because I was like, will he get a traffic stop? Is he going to be a victim of that?" Mother said. For the time that he was released, he was never set free, she continued. Living in constant fear, is this going to be the day that they're going to lock him up, beat him up, or kill him? I live with that. That is torture. You don't need to worry about traffic stops at all if you could just refrain from trying to kill the officer. That's the one weird trick. The one weird trick to survive a traffic stop is to not try to kill the police officer. Did you know your internet provider watches your every move online? They track all your clicks and time spent online building a profile that they sell to the highest bidder. Sounds illegal and should be, but isn't. Why? Because the government benefits also. It creates a loophole around your Fourth Amendment rights. Normally, the government needs a warrant to collect your information without consent, but when they buy it from data brokers instead, completely legal, no warrant required. These data brokers are eroding our freedoms as Americans. Unfortunately, there's a solution which I use. It's called ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, all my online activity travels through secure, encrypted servers. Nobody, not even my internet provider, can track my movements or infringe on my rights. Whenever I'm on the road, whether it be at the hotel or at the airport, I always make sure to have ExpressVPN on my computer, and you can never be too careful. ExpressVPN makes being cautious really easy. And here's some exciting news. ExpressVPN just launched Identity Defender for U.S. customers, included at no cost. It removes your data from brokers' files, monitors the dark web for your information, and alerts you if someone tries using your social security number. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by scanning the QR code on screen. Click the link in the description box below or by going to expressvpn.com/Matt Walsh Show. I've been pulled over a bunch of times, and I've used that trick every time. I've had to remember it. I have it written down in my notes. I have it written in my phone in notes. Don't try to kill police officer if he gets pulled over. And so I just go check it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Check. And then I survived the traffic stop. It's crazy how that works. There's also a quote from Cure's brother saying, quote, "He really should be alive. The officer hit him with a baton and tased him twice, as a matter of fact, but he did not have to shoot him." Now, eventually the article gets around to saying that a fight ensued between Cure and the officer without making it clear that Cure was clearly the instigator of the fight. Now, it's not hard to see what's going on here. NBC Black existed for one reason, to stoke racial resentment and open racial warfare in this country. It was explicit propaganda of the worst imaginable kind. They deliberately ran cover for violent black felons, even when their crimes were caught on camera, in order to spread the false narrative that innocent black people were being hunted by the police. And by the way, not that it's the most important part of the story, but Leonard Cure probably did commit that armed robbery that sent him to prison for 16 years. He wasn't really exonerated. What happens in virtually all of these cases, which is not talked about enough, but when somebody is supposedly exonerated decades after the fact, what almost always happens is that a left-wing court applies unrealistic standards of evidence to an ancient case long after the witnesses are gone, DNA evidence, long after DNA evidence could have been collected. And then they let the criminal loose and claim that it's an exoneration. And really, it was not an exoneration. It was just equity in action. In this particular situation, Cure received more than $800,000 for his alleged wrongful conviction. That's nearly $1 million. And if this guy were really an upstanding citizen who had been wrongfully accused, he'd take that huge sum of money and go live a normal life. But guess what? That's not what this guy did. Just 3 years after getting out of jail, he tried to murder a deputy on the side of the road on camera for no reason. And he was driving 100 miles an hour, endangering everybody's life on the freeway. And then he tried to commit premeditated murder. That's the guy who was exonerated for committing armed robbery. Right. It's almost as if he was like a violent felon all along. It's almost as if the vast majority of these exonerations are total nonsense. But let's not pick on NBC Black too much, even though everyone who worked there deserves to rot in the unemployment line. As I mentioned, NBC Out was also dismantled this week, and that's very good news because, like their counterparts at NBC Black, the folks at NBC Out were also engaged in the business of spreading hoaxes on a full-time basis. Here's one example from a couple of years ago. Quote, It's been 25 years since Matthew Shepard, a gay 21-year-old University of Wyoming student, died 6 days after he was savagely beaten by two young men and tied to a remote fence to meet his fate. His death has been memorialized as an egregious hate crime that helped fuel the LGBTQ rights movement over the ensuing years. Now, notice the sleight of hand in that paragraph. It's actually pathological. They don't say that Matthew Shepard was actually killed in a hate crime, because they know he wasn't. He was killed as part of a meth deal gone bad, and one of his killers was a former gay lover. That's been widely reported at this point. NBC Out knows that. Everybody knows that. So instead of directly lying, NBC Out writes that Shepard's death has, quote, been memorialized as an egregious hate crime. In other words, they're saying, basically, people said it was a hate crime. And even though we know that's wrong, we're going to repeat the lie without providing any context. Again, this is a news division at a news network. And it clearly exists to spread hoaxes and propaganda. Now, predictably, left-wing media outlets are crying about these layoffs, saying it's a sign that white supremacy is on the rise or whatever. Now, I could give dozens more examples, of course, of the propaganda produced by these NBC divisions, like the time an NBC black pundit demanded that the FCC punish anyone who misgendered, meaning correctly gendered, so-called trans individuals. Or I could talk about the time NBC Out pushed a Catholic school to hire a lesbian lacrosse coach. Instead of going through all that, I'll just say that we need many, many more layoffs like this. And it looks like we're going to get them. That's the good news. Over at CBS News, the new boss, Barry Weiss, channeled Elon Musk and asked every employee to send a memo documenting what they do all day. And here's how the CBS union responded, quote, "We're aware of the email that was sent asking CBS employees to provide information about their jobs. Many of you have expressed concern to us about the purpose of the email, and we share those concerns. We suggest you refrain from responding." Yes, they're horrified about the prospect of telling their boss what they do all day. The union is directing the employees not to respond because this is such a grave intrusion. As you might have guessed, mass layoffs are now reportedly planned at CBS News as well, and presumably they're going to start with the people who refuse to answer that email. So very soon, CBS News, the same outlet that doctored an interview with Kamala Harris to help her campaign, then paid out millions of dollars because of it, is going to be gutted from within. We need to see many, many more stories like this. Along with the Supreme Court case we talked about in the open, it's much needed good news. A sign of real progress in the culture. People can see through the identity-based slop and the partisan propaganda posing as news, and they're tired of watching it. The audience has left the station. And that is why NBC Black and NBC Out, along with the CBS News employees who don't want to tell their boss what they do all day, are all today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.